Julie, thank you. I'm struggling to find the right words. It's so beautiful. You've given us a deeper perspective on the spiritual life. Things that jumped out for me, there were so many, but your discussion about the self-imposed obstacles we face, and then later, the importance of self-love and self-acceptance. Just phenomenal. And I know everyone, along with me, we're all looking forward to having the opportunity to ask you some questions. Charlene asks, how do we share this knowledge with children?
Well, first, let me thank you all for being here. I also want to thank the speakers who have been wonderful with their mind-blowing lectures this weekend. Their contributions have been beyond inspiring. And I must add an amendment, a footnote to my lecture by saying that every time I said, science cannot explain this, after Jude's talk, science can explain so much more. So you can change it, but materialistic science cannot explain this, but Jude Caravan can. And I am excited for the rest of the scientific community to catch up with those findings. And one day our children can learn that in school. And that will be when the whole scientific community embraces these ideas as well. So how to share this with children? It's interesting question, and I'll try my best to share a little bit. I think that nothing can be forced on children. Like children, most of the time, bring this experience very vividly in them. And we only need to allow it. We only need to create the right environment for them to feel safe, for them to feel heard and seen, so they can share with us what they already know and what they already bring. As part of the talk was mentioning how, we've been walking this path for many lifetimes. And sometimes it's just allowing the child to remember what they already know in those moments in which the soul is still so close to the past experience, before the life puts the heavy hand on their shoulders. We can help them remember. Always as an invitation, sometimes even as a game, so it doesn't feel serious or heavy.
Thank you, Julie. That's very helpful. So you shared that thoughts condition our spiritual experience. Would you comment on that some more, please?
Yes. While Jude was talking, I was thinking how how the scientific community would shift from a paradigm so materialistic into this new paradigm. And I was reflecting on how the structures that we create can limit us to see, these new findings in science. So this materialistic paradigm versus this non-physical, much deeper levels, of causality, as she said. So thoughts create reality. She also talked about that. We live in this mental universe. So thoughts have the power to create reality, to create structures, to shape how we experience life. And so they create images as well. If I ask each one of you right now to close your eyes and picture in your mind the way you conceive the spiritual life, it has almost like a visual image in you. You have created, all of us, I have created structures within me that depict, even as an image, how I envision this process to be. So that is a double-edged sword. That has a consequence. It can block experience, it can condition experience, or it can assist experience. So let's see how it can block. It can block experience when, I was mentioning this feeling of unworthiness that can be from a trauma or emotional experience, but also from knowledge, from a certain type, the cultivation of a certain type of thought. And that has an effect on all our subtle bodies. The mind has an effect on every other subtle body. Everything is, we cannot say anymore everything is connected. Now we have to say everything is one, even from a scientific point of view. Everything is influencing one another. So in that way, belief can block experience. If I believe that something is not real or not true or not good for me, I may not experience it. So then knowledge can, or thoughts can, condition my experience in the way that, for example, when you read the lives of the mystics, you see that their experience, their spiritual experiences matched their belief system. So, the Christians saw Jesus or heard Jesus or saw the angels. They never saw Krishna or a deva in a way that is seen in the Hindu tradition. So it certainly gives a shape and a form. That is the way we understand it and interpret it. Now, thought can also assist experience. And we see it, for example, this morning with the meditation, when we were trying to, Pablo was guiding us into letting go of the ways in which we're identified with this body, with these emotions, and with this movement of thought. So placing ourselves in that point in which we are more connected with what's eternal, boundless, undefined, we assist something else to inspire us. That may be of a higher type of, a nature of a higher thought, or a thought influenced by our Buddhic nature.
Wow. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. It reminded me a little bit of what Eugene was talking about yesterday morning. He was talking about psychosis, but he talked about the these are not his words, energy coming in, but also that there is the experiences of this lifetime that impact us. And I think that's part of where some of those obstacles may come if we've grown up or been exposed to an environment in which we are told that we are not worthy, not capable, not whatever, that we're conditioned in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. All right, let's see. On to the next question. Juliana, could you help us to find a way to step away from conviction, to be more open to different or larger perspectives? Is there a theosophical approach to being more accepting?
Thank you for the question. I think, that we certainly, in all spiritual circles, we have to work with this. And for anything that needs to be seen, I think that awareness is always the first step. It's like, as long as I am completely unaware of my conditioning, there's nothing I can do about it. As long as I am completely unaware of the fact that I have created these very rigid structures, nothing is going to take me out of that. So awareness is always the first step. But then having the intention to see conditioning is also important. Like, if we ask ourselves, in what ways am I conditioned? How do I think that I have, what are the structures I have created? And I think that group discussion has a tremendous potential to see our own structures. And there's where comes like perhaps the theosophical approach, that we sit around other people and we share so many ideas. And when we share ideas, it's interesting because we are very capable of seeing the structures that others have and not so much the structures that we have. So when we see them, it is an opportunity right there to say, how am I structured in this way? What are the patterns I have created in the similar way this person has created her or his own structures? And the question and the intention to see may bring a certain clarity on where we've been perhaps less flexible than we could be.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So this question, I think, kind of falls into that. Honesty is hard because our ideal is so high. Humility isn't thinking less of ourselves than others, but acknowledging our imperfections and loving, accepting ourselves anyway. It's a quote from you.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment goes on, wow, thanks for helping me see more clearly the importance to surrender our perfectionism on our path to a more authentic life. Anything else to say about this?
Well, thank you for that comment. I think it's the work of all of us. I have to say I am probably the greatest perfectionist of all. And I see that in myself a lot. So it's just the daily noticing and the freedom that comes from honesty, the freedom that comes from acceptance. We don't have to be in a particular way. We can see ourselves as we are, as a working project. We can certainly perfect it, but that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying. So thank you for that reminder.
You talk about the importance of self-love and self-acceptance. This can be difficult for many as they assume it is selfish or self-centered and can even cause feelings of superiority. Would you talk about this a little more and perhaps even give us some suggestions about how to love and accept ourselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most theosophists don't like to talk much about this subject, but I think it's very important and needed. I think we know so little about love, and we confuse it with many things. Love is like this distant cousin that we have that we rarely see. And I think the problem lies there, and how little we are connected to love or know about it or recognize it even when it's in our being. Love is never selfish. That would be attachment. That won't be love. Love is never self-centered. That would be pride or narcissism. Of course, there are levels of love. We are learning to love. So personal love can look a lot like attachment and can look a lot like certain self-centeredness. But the point is to move to unconditional love, which is what I would call real love, or what is worth calling love. There is this beautiful, probably my favorite description of love of all times in Corinthians 13 by St. Paul, in which he describes every angle of love. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it is not proud, it is not self-seeking, it keeps no records of wrong, and so many more attributes to love that I think it's a great way for us to revise our own relationship with love. How much are we understanding what love is? I think love feels and looks a lot more like freedom and peace than anything else. Now about how to develop love, we can think of, also how to develop compassion toward ourselves and care. I think everything begins with acceptance. And again, with the awareness of when we are not accepting, of when we are not loving toward ourselves. Sometimes there's deep work of forgiveness that needs to be done that, we tend to push under the rug, not to see it. So at its core, it could be a profound need to let go of certain things to be able to be established in our nature, which is love itself. One of the practices I really like is the metta practice from the Buddhist tradition, or also called Maitri in Sanskrit, metta in Pali. And it is this practice of loving kindness, of compassion. And even though sometimes you see it as a practice that begins with cultivating compassion toward oneself, I have learned from a Buddhist teacher, Ajahn Brahm, that the best way of cultivating this practice is by starting with something. He says, metta is like building a fire. And you can't begin a fire with a big log. You have to begin it with dried leaves and pieces of paper. So something that catches fire very easily. So with metta, with compassion, because we don't necessarily live in an atmosphere of love, what we do is to bring to awareness, or bring to the mind, an element, a person, or a creature, an imaginary creature that evokes in us the deepest compassion or the deepest unconditional love that we're capable of. And once that fire is ignited, we can begin to add other elements to it. So then he goes into great detail on how to do this practice, and the practice is actually on our website. It's one of the practices I did during the pandemic. It's called metta meditation, and there you have it in its full extent, complete. But the idea is that the point that I want to make is that it seems to be easier to love other things first before we love ourselves. So taking that wisdom, he used different elements and at the very end, he says, we throw the biggest log, ourselves. And we sit in that loving kindness for some time, for the end of the practice. And the words that he uses for us to follow and say in that moment are, to me, one of the best examples of how to practice metta.
Thank you so much. A couple of things along those lines. So I think that you're talking about a meditation that is on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm just making sure that people can find it, and that is it titled Metta? So
when you go to our website, to our YouTube channel, there is a series of meditations. So we have a playlist that is on meditation, and within that playlist, there's one that is on metta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can you spell metta for us?
Yes, it's METTA.
You know, Juli, when you were talking, that also made me think, so I'd like your perspectives kind of on this. When we struggle with self-love and self-acceptance, It's almost as if we're denying that divine aspect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we're all from that same source, then I am as important as everybody else. Not more,
Mm-hmm.
but not
But no
less.
less.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was actually reflecting on it today while I was listening to Jude. How it's also a bit of a not like the lack of recognition of oneness, because is this separation, duality mentality that we sustain, and so there is really no difference or separation between myself and the rest. So it is the negation of that, of oneness and of the divine life that is trying to express through this vehicle. Why would I be compassionate to this poor being who's trying to do her best in this world, as much as I could be compassionate to others?
Thank you. Another question. Can you talk a little more about how the process of our experiences can transform our ideas and take us to a higher level of seeing? And then how do we sustain it?
Experiences are very personal. So experiences connect with the reality that we are living in, each one of us, the stories we have created up to this point, the knowledge that we have. And in the case, in that example, I was talking about the experience that comes from practice. And once we have placed our time and dedicate our time to a practice for a long time, then glimpses of intuition or of truth come to us, and life also comes to our aid to test those insights. So experience is a kind of a complex creation that arises in this, that begins in the search with the intellect, but then moves through this phases of practice, of trying, in the case of meditation, for example, or cultivation of virtue, or consciously trying to be of service, whatever the practice that we follow. And in that practice, then we begin to have an experience that relates to that. And that experience opens us up to slightly higher levels of truth or reality that we were not able to perceive before, because we were not ready for them. So I feel that is I don't know if that's clear, but that's how I perceive that process to be, and how we grow and expand in this journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question for you. Can you talk in your talk? You talked about longing. Mm-hmm. Is longing different than desire?
Mm-hmm. Longing is a beautiful subject, and a beautiful feeling as well, I think. And it's to some extent a mystery. It has been called, longing has been called the perfume of love, or the fragrance of love. And some say that it is how the divine calls us back home. So when we feel longing, when we feel this desire, sometimes as a subtle pain, sometimes as this desire to return to oneness, or to know truth, to know who we truly are, is the call our higher self, or the call of the divine, or the call from God, whatever your belief system is, to return to that source. So longing is a gift, and I think we pay very little attention to longing. If we stay with it, how when we feel a physical sensation, we tend to either embrace it or reject it, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. And with longing, because sometimes can be heavy, sometimes can be slightly painful, we may not want to acknowledge it. It is something that is there, but I don't really want to see it. So when we sit with longing and let longing speak to us, what is it that is bringing? There can be a closer understanding of what it is. It differs from desire in the sense that it is a refined desire, because it's not for the things of the world or things of the flesh, like some traditions say, but the desire of being one with God. And like the book Light on the Path, when it talks about desire, it says, desire only that which is within you, desire only that which is beyond you, desire only that which is unattainable. So that desire is longing.
Thank you. So we have another question. So when people start to ask, where was I, or what was I, or who was I before I was born, and they get glimpses, or will they get glimpses? Can they get glimpses of past lives or past beings? Like when you were talking about with dreaming, is that a possibility to bring that from the past?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly possible. We have access to that memory. We potentially have the capability of accessing that past, that memory. In fact, it is one of the things that HPB says about the heart. The memory of the heart carries the experience of all past lives. The thing is that how to access that information is not as easy as we think it may be. And it takes time, and it takes discipline, and it takes also a certain level of purity. When the heart is our divine nature, and to be in touch with the divine, we have to be divine-like or God-like, like Kurt was saying in his talk. And the more we become that, the more access we have to what comes with that state of being. So we cannot remain as we are and have access to that center. There has to be a certain amount of letting go of identification with the vehicles. There has to be a certain amount of cultivation of stillness and silence, and of virtue, for us to be able to become in tune with something that is accessible to us.
Thank you. So one more question. Probably do this one, and there may be one time for one more. We'll see. Quote, desire only that which is unattainable. How can someone sustain this commitment or impulse over time if it is a consistent experience?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. The quote is, desire only that which is unattainable. How can someone sustain this commitment or impulse over time if it is a consistent experience? How can somebody sustain it?
Well, I wouldn't be concerned about sustaining anything. Sustaining is something that, we can always try. We can always attempt to live in accordance to that desire. And that desire alone will help us get the rest, in the sense that there is a level of action that we can perform. There's a level of intention that we could put in place. It's like we can knock at the door, but we're not the ones who open the door. We can live with a discipline or with an intention, like every day, every morning we wake up and bring to ourselves the idea of living in a particular way. And what happens is that as we go along that path, we begin to be helped and guided. Well, life comes to our aid in a way. We can say life, we can say, the divine, our higher self. Whatever is involved in the process will become part of it. So then the mystics say, just be concerned about loving God and only loving God, and He will teach you the rest Himself. Those are a quote from Saint Teresa of Avila. So take that and translate it into your own terms. And I think that's how we'll be sustained through time.
Thank you. Beautiful. One last question. One important qualification on the path that you did not mention is purification. It's kind of what you were talking about a little bit earlier in the question and answer phase. Do you see purification as an important part in this process?
Yes, it is indeed one of the main virtues that are mentioned over and over again, especially in the Theosophical literature. And because it is mentioned so many times and so much, I try not to make great emphasis on that, especially because it can make us feel that we are not pure, and that my feeling is that we need to work a little bit more in understanding what is purity, what is a pure mind, what is a pure heart. And I'm leaning more and more towards the idea that purity is that which contemplates the other. Purity is that which is based on oneness. So it has little or nothing to do with sin, or with the opposite of sin. In the book, The Cloud of Unknowing, the teacher talks about two clouds: the cloud of forgetting beneath you and the cloud of unknowing above you, between you and God. And so the author says, if the cloud of unknowing, and of course these are two images, in the cloud of forgetting, we are supposed to drop and let go everything that has to do with creation, everything that has to do with the world. In theosophical terms, we would say with the personality, all our attachments to the vehicles of expression. So when we drop all that into the cloud of forgetting, then we are free to enter into the cloud of unknowing. Otherwise, whatever we're carrying with us is pulling us down into that experience and not the experience of the divine. We cannot have one foot on each world. It is one or the other. So the more we take off the foot from the world, the more we lean toward the divine experience. So the author says, if the cloud of unknowing makes you feel separated from God, it is because the cloud of forgetting is still not fully worked or formed. And I'm paraphrasing. Which means that the more we let go of our attachments, the more we are, and our identification with the movement of thought, the movement of emotion, the five senses, the more we are connected or open to the perception of what we may call unknown.
Thank you so much. One thing that you said as you started to answer that question is something like, well, right now I'm thinking, and that just gives me so much joy because it reminds me that our perspectives continue to change as we continue to study, meditate, contemplate. It deepens. And it's so important for us to always remember that and continue on that path.
Thank you. I have to say that the lectures this past weekend have done that for me. I'm like rethinking, restructuring, revisiting, and I'm very grateful for that. Yes. And for this time together.
These conversations that focus on the depth of our being, the importance of experience, so much to contemplate and to consider into the future. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you.